Hello and welcome. Today I'm going to demonstrate the installation of Ubuntu Server version 12.04 in VMware Workstation for Windows version 8. You need a couple of things to get started. First of all, you need the VMware Workstation 8 product. It's available as a free 30-day trial by visiting VMware.com and looking at the Workstation page. You can go ahead and download it, install it, try it for free for 30 days, and if you decide you want to keep it, then you can arrange to acquire it. The second thing you need is the Ubuntu ISO for Server. The ISO is actually an image of the installation CD. We'll use that to install Ubuntu in VMware Workstation. Visit ubuntu.com/download. Select the Server Installation option. When you get to that page, take a look over here on the right at Choose Your Flavor. Note that there are two options. There's a 64-bit, which is listed as recommended, and a 32-bit version. If you were installing this on a physical server, then you'd probably want the 64-bit version if you had a 64-bit processor that supported server calls and server operations. But I'm going to suggest that for this virtual machine, which you're going to be running on a Windows desktop, that you ought to choose a 32-bit. That's going to run a little bit better in the virtualization, and that suits our purposes better. So select 32-bit, click Start the download, save it off to a location on your computer that you can find later. I'll be saving mine to the desktop. Be aware that this is a very large file. It's about 700 megabytes, so depending on your connection speed and how busy the Ubuntu site is at the time, this could take anywhere from several minutes to perhaps an hour, even an hour or longer, depending on a number of variables. So give it some time. That's all you need to get started. Then I'm going to suggest you fire up the VMware Workstation product. We're going to create a new virtual machine. You can do that either from the Create a New Virtual Machine link on the Home tab, or you can go to File, New Virtual Machine, and that will start the wizard. For this installation, I'm going to recommend that you select the typical, unless you know in advance that there's some custom options that you're going to need to make. But for a virtual machine on the desktop in VMware Workstation, the typical is almost always going to be the satisfactory choice. Click Next. You have three choices to install from. I'm going to suggest you select the one to install the operating system later. That will actually put you into a manual install process, which I think gives you several more options when you install Server. So click down here, I will install the operating system later, and click Next. Now on this page, you should then tell the VMware Workstation that you're going to be installing Linux and that the version that you're installing is Ubuntu. So make sure those options are checked on this page. Click Next. At this point, you need to give the virtual machine a name. I'm going to select Ubuntu 12.04s for Server. It's going to create a subfolder by that name in your virtual machines folder. As the default location. That's probably going to work well for you. Otherwise, if you want to install this on an external hard drive or a flash drive, you can browse to a different location and install accordingly. Click Next. The disk capacity defaults to 20 gigabytes. This is the maximum size that your virtual machine could reach. It actually starts out small, only as much as it needs, and will grow to that size as you add files. It's unlikely that you'll need more than 20 gigabytes unless you know in advance that you're going to be installing, say, video files or something that you know needs more room. Adjust this if you need to, but otherwise the default of 20 is a good idea. I'm also going to recommend that you select the option to split the virtual disk into multiple files. That's going to make it much easier if at some point you want to move it to an external hard drive or flash drive or move or copy it somewhere. Click Next. You can review the settings here. Just to highlight a couple, it's selected 1024 megabytes for memory. That's probably a good choice. If you're squeezed on memory, you could probably knock that down to 512 megabytes on Server. Note also that it's starting out with network address translation for a network adapter. That's a good choice to get this process started. You can change that to bridged later if you have a reason to. Other devices, it usually picks up as a default the other devices that are on your host computer. You probably don't need to worry about those. If you decide you need to change the memory or the network adapter for some reason, you can select custom hardware and change it. In any case, press Finish, and you'll see a summary of the virtual machine and the options. Now at this point, what we need to do is we need to attach the ISO file that we downloaded from Ubuntu. So highlight CD DVD and click on that, and then over here on the right for connection, where it says Use Physical Drive, you're going to want to instead select Use ISO Image File and browse to the location where you downloaded the ISO file. Recall that I downloaded mine to the desktop, so that's where I'm going to go find it. Make sure you pick the correct ISO if you have more than one. We're going to be installing Server 12.04, so I'm going to make sure that's selected. I'm going to click Open, and then I'm going to click OK. And you can verify that it's actually made that selection for you. Now we're just going to power on the virtual machine to get the installation process started. It will boot VMware and then load the ISO file. Let me talk about the installation screen for a minute. The installation is going to proceed as a command line environment, which means there is no mouse and there is no GUI environment, graphical user interface environment. So in order to proceed with the installation, you're going to need to click your mouse inside this box, at which point the mouse disappears because it's no longer in a graphical environment. If you need to get the mouse back to run something while this installation routine is running, note at the bottom left it says to return to your computer, press Control-Alt. Go ahead and press Control-Alt. That will return the mouse cursor to you so you can do other things. And then when you want to return to the installation screen, click in the box again, and you're at the command line environment. The first thing you need to do is select your installation language. It defaults to English. Of course, that's going to be fine for me. You can use your arrow keys if you need to select something else. I'm going to select English and then press Enter. And now you see the main installation screen. I would recommend the first time you run this that you do arrow down and run the utility to check the disk for defects. This will make sure that the file that you downloaded from Ubuntu didn't get corrupted. If it does get corrupted, it can cause some odd and sometimes difficult to troubleshoot problems during installation. So check the disk for defects. It'll run through a routine that will tell you whether or not the disk is good or not, the ISO file is good or not, return you to this point. I'm not going to demonstrate that, but I would recommend you go ahead and do that, at least the first time. Then arrow back up to install Ubuntu Server and press Enter. The installation process then starts. It will begin to configure some things. As we go along, there will be several points where it's installing things. At those particular points, I'll pause the recording so you don't have to watch the screen, but be aware there are some steps in here that will take place, that the installation routine is installing files, and you don't need to watch that, but we'll stop at each one of the prompts you need to be aware of. The first prompt that you need to be aware of that you're going to have to interact with the installation program is to select a language. This is the language used for the installation process, and that's the language that will also be used for the installed system. Simply arrow up and down to your choice if English is not the default that you want. When you have the language selected, just press Enter to continue. It's also going to ask you to select a country based on the language. Again, arrow up or down. When you're happy with a choice, press Enter to continue. It wants to know if you need to configure the keyboard. I'm going to suggest that you probably don't need to configure the keyboard, and in fact it defaults to no. If you select yes, and you can get to yes simply by using the Tab key to go to the different options down here. If you select yes, it'll go through a routine where it asks you to type in different keys, and it'll try to determine your keyboard layout. My suspicion is you already know if you have a non-standard keyboard, so I'm going to suggest you select no, and then if you do need to select a different keyboard, you can select it from this list. It defaults to US English. That's probably going to be the best choice for most of you, so press Enter. And then for the keyboard layout, English US is the default, and that's also probably the best choice for most of you, so press Enter again. It's going to go through a process of detecting hardware and doing some other initial setup routines. I'll pause the recording. We'll come back at the next installation prompt. Now it's asking you to enter a host name for the system. The host name should be short and simple, one word, using only characters and letters. It defaults to Ubuntu. I'm only going to add 1204S to identify exactly which system this is. If you'd like to choose something else, you can, but again, make sure it's short and simple. Uses only numbers or letters. When you're ready, press the Tab key until Continue is highlighted, and then press Enter. You now need to enter the first primary user, and it's going to want a full username and a user account name. You can enter your full name here. I'm just going to put in user1 for this installation. And press Tab until Continue is highlighted, and then press Enter. And I'm also going to use user1 for the actual username for the account. And I'll press Tab and then Continue. And now it's going to want a password. I'm just going to want to use password. Continue, and then repeat that. And of course you can choose something that's more secure if you feel it necessary. But I'm just going to make it simple for this so I don't forget it. If you do choose something more complex, be sure to write it down. If you forget it, then it's a little bit tedious to try to recover it. The next prompt is whether or not you encrypt your home directory. I'm going to suggest that that's probably not necessary unless you have a particular reason for doing so. No is the default, so press Enter. You can always encrypt it later if you change your mind. It will set up the clock and make a best guess at your time zone based on your IP address. It's usually correct. If it's not, you can tab to No and then pick your location from a list. But if it is correct, and it usually is, the default is yes. Go ahead and press Enter to continue. It's going through a process now where it's going to be detecting disks. The next step up is going to be the partitioner. If you are installing this on a physical system, especially one with multiple hard drives, then you might want to go ahead and select the default, which is use entire disk and set up LVM, or use entire disk and set up encrypted LVM, or even do a manual partitioning process. That's really not necessary for this virtual machine. The virtual machine just has a single virtual hard drive, which is actually only a file on your host computer. So I'm going to suggest that your best option here for this particular installation is to arrow up and select Guided, use entire disk, press Enter. There will be one disk highlighted only, so at this point you would press Enter. You can take a look then at the partitioning screen as it comes back. If this were a physical system, you'd want to take a pretty careful look at this because this is not something that can be undone once it starts. But of course on the virtual machine that we're installing here, there really is no issue at all. So tab over to Yes and press Enter. It will format the partition and start doing some additional installation. Once again, I'll pause the recording. Now the installation program is asking if you need to install a proxy. Enter the address of a proxy server. You almost certainly don't have to do this at a home installation. If you happen to be working in a corporate environment, business environment, where they're using firewall proxy servers, then you might need to enter something here, in which case you would ask your network admin for the proxy information. But I'm going to suggest most of you can just tab over to continue, leave it blank, and go ahead and press Enter. Now it would like to know whether you want to manage upgrades by installing upgrades automatically, or whether you want to do that manually. In a server environment, you almost always do that manually. No automatic updates is the default selection, and I'd suggest you keep that default. Make sure that no automatic updates is highlighted and press Enter to continue. Now at this point, it's going to ask what other optional server programs you want to install. You can take a look at this list and see if there are any. Before you press Enter, though, let me tell you how the screen works. To get to each of these in turn, use your arrow keys to go up or down. Don't press Enter yet. When you see one that you want, make sure that the box is highlighted and then press the space bar. The space bar will put an asterisk there, and that will mean that that file will be included. as it continues the installation process. At the very least, I suggest you go ahead and install Openssh server. That will allow you to get at your server virtual machine using access programs like SSH, PuTTY, WinSCP, other utilities that are typically used to upload and download files to servers. So you probably want Openssh installed. I'm also going to suggest that it's a good idea to install LAMP if you think you might need it at all. LAMP is the LAMP stack is the stack that includes the Apache web server, MySQL database, and PHP scripting language. So I always select that because those are the ones I use frequently. If there are any other of the applications you see or that you want to experiment with, you can arrow up and down and highlight those as well. When you have the ones selected that you want, press the Tab key so the Continue is highlighted, and only then press Enter. If you selected the LAMP stack, it's going to ask you to enter a password for the MySQL. Strictly speaking, that's not necessary, but it is highly recommended. Go ahead and do it at this time. If you do enter a password at this time, be sure to write it down because once again, it's a little bit tedious to try to recover it if you enter one here and forget it. I'm just going to use the word MySQL. I'm going to use all small case. You might want to consider doing the same. Tab to continue, and then of course you need to repeat that. So small case MySQL is the one that I'm going to use. Tab over to continue, and then press Enter. And now it's going to install the remainder of the software that you selected and do some final cleanup. Once again, I'll pause the recording. We're now almost complete. This prompt is asking you if you want to install the Grub bootloader into the virtual machine. And the answer to this would be yes. Now, if you were installing this on a physical system, particularly one that might already have other operating systems installed on it, such as Windows or another Linux system, you might already have a bootloader application that you want to use. And in that case, you might want to give some thought to this. But in our case, the default is yes. And for the virtual machine installation, that's definitely the one that you should take. Make sure yes is highlighted and press Enter. It will go ahead and take care of that and finish up the installation. Now it says the installation is complete. It asks you to remove the installation media, CD-ROM, floppies, and so on. We don't actually need to worry about that. We installed this not using a CD-ROM, but using an ISO file, which is an image of the CD-ROM. And VMware will actually boot from the virtual hard drive instead of the CD-ROM once this is installed. So you don't really need to do anything at this point. Simply press Enter to continue. It will finish the operation. It will take a few seconds to reboot, and it will boot into the system. You'll see a number of messages flashing by. You don't need to interact with any of these. Most of them go by too quickly to even see what they're doing. But of course, if you have some installation hang up or some problem with booting, then it might stop and give you some informative or not so informative message at this point. But usually it just goes through and completes the boot. And eventually it asks you to log in. Go ahead and log in with a username and password you set during the installation, user1, and press Enter. Note that when you enter the password, nothing displays, not even asterisks. So go ahead and just enter the password and press Enter. And assuming you typed it in right, the system will boot. You're now at the command line prompt, which is as far as we're going to go for this demonstration. A couple of house cleaning tasks at this point. First of all, go ahead and press Control-Alt to release your mouse. And note that down here there's a button to click that lets VMware know that you finished installing. So go ahead, release your mouse, and click that prompt to make it go away. Now there's a couple of ways that you can shut the system down. One is to go ahead and click back into this virtual machine here, into the command line, and you can shut down with a Linux command line, which is sudo shutdown minus capital P, and beware of the letters in cases. Linux is case sensitive. And then when you want to shut down, which would be now. If you press enter, it'll ask for the password because this is a super user command. It requires root access. And then that will shut the system down cleanly. The other thing you can do, and I'm going to press Control-Alt to release the mouse again, is to use the VMware function to simply pause this virtual machine. That's this icon up here on the left. It looks like the pause icon. You can click on that, and then that will actually save the virtual machine state. When you start it up again, it will immediately start at the point where you shut it down without having to go through a full boot. So either one of those options are good. You can resume the virtual machine by selecting it over here on the left and clicking the start icon, or clicking the resume this virtual machine from the tab that appears. And so that's really it for today's demonstration. Hope you enjoyed it. The best thing to do to learn the system is to play around with it. So have fun, and thank you for watching.